Hi, everyone. Welcome. I'm so grateful to have the opportunity to share this information and practice with all of you. This is a topic that I think is really important, but we often don't take the time to talk about it. I have spent a lot of time learning about supervision, relationships, and feedback over the years, but we can all always do better in this area. For those of you who don't know me yet, my name's Amelia Dalphonse, and I'm the co founder of Master ABA. I am a BCBA and have worked in the field of ABA since 2009. My background is in early childhood education, but I got my introduction to ABA while working at a community mental health center in New Hampshire. I now live in Tampa, Florida with my husband, daughter, two cats, and two dogs. So I apologize in advance for any noise that you might hear in the background. Over the years, I have worked in a variety of settings and have had the honor of providing supervision for staff and trainees in different environments, specialties, including clinics, group homes, schools, home based ABA, and educational consulting. Many of these candidates have gone on to play important roles in their chosen ABA specialties. This has shown me how far reaching the impact of supervision can be. One of the most important aspects of supervision is feedback, which is what we are going to talk about today. Just a couple of really quick housekeeping items before we get started. I know you're all really excited about learning about feedback, but as an added bonus, you can earn one supervision CEU by completing the course. The BACB requires that I verify attendance for the duration of the training. So throughout the webinar, I'm going to give you code words. These code words are how I'm going to verify attendance. Make a note of these words because you will need them for the quiz. Your first code word is learning. All right, so let's get started. My main goal for this webinar is to share some of the research and techniques that I've studied over the years, but none of that is important if it doesn't help you become a better supervisor. If I have done a good job teaching, by the end of this webinar, you will be able to describe the importance of high quality supervision, describe the relationship between feedback and high quality supervision, describe why you should avoid the feedback sandwich, use the ACT matrix as a guide for understanding the motivation of staff and trainees, and demonstrate effective feedback strategies during supervision with your staff and trainees. Supervision is the most effective way to have a lasting impact in our field. When you provide high quality supervision, you impact the lives of the families that your staff and trainees work with. You also impact the supervision of anyone your staff and trainee supervise or mentor in the future. If you provide supervision to 6 trainees, who then each provide supervision to just 2 more trainees, once they become BCBAs, you have influenced the work of 18 professionals. Providing an exceptional supervision experience gives you exponential reach in our field. Whether you provide high or low quality supervision, you're going to influence the direction of our field. There's no way around it. High quality supervision leads to ethical practices, client-centered services, outcome-focused services, and an improvement in the field of ABA. Low quality supervision leads to unethical practices, poor learner outcomes, profit-focused services, and the degradation of the field of ABA. The choice is yours. I know you want to have a positive impact on our field, and that's why you're here. Let's take a minute to operationally define both supervision and feedback so we are all on the same page. Turner, 2017, defines supervision as the active process of systematically shaping the myriad skills required of individuals seeking to formally practice applied behavior analysis. That's a bit vague, but it covers the main intent of supervision: to shape behavior of staff and trainees to help them become better practitioners. This process of supervision requires teaching new skills and influencing previously learned behaviors through both antecedent and consequence strategies. A supervisor might look to increase or decrease any of these previously learned behaviors. One of the most effective and common consequence strategies in supervision is feedback, which is what we are all here to talk about. Mangio-Pinello and Hems, 2015, wrote a very thorough definition of feedback. It's a bit wordy, but much more precise than Turner's definition of supervision. They defined feedback as the presentation of an exteroceptive stimulus whose parameters vary as a function of parameters of antecedent responding. The feedback stimulus may vary along one or more dimensions with any number of parameters of responding, both quantitative and qualitative. It may describe characteristics of the immediately prior response or a predetermined target response or goal, and possibly the relation between the two, i.e., whether they are members of the same response class or, if not, how they differ. It may also describe the contingency between responding and the consequence of responding. The feedback stimulus may be presented in a number of forms or modalities, e.g., verbal statements, tones, or images, and may vary with a single response dimension or a combination of response dimensions. Wow, that is a whole lot of words. This definition makes feedback sound ominous. The authors are saying that feedback is presented by someone, often a supervisor or peer, and it may include different characteristics depending on the situation. A supervisor may present feedback verbally, in writing, or through nonverbal communication methods. We often think of feedback as either positive or corrective, but it may not always be so black and white. Feedback can become confusing for staff when the supervisor fails to make the intent of feedback clear. As we just discussed, the primary goal of supervision is to shape the behavior of your staff or trainee by encouraging or reinforcing those behaviors that you want to see more of, and by discouraging or punishing those behaviors you want to see less of. Most often, these consequences come in the form of feedback to our staff. Mangio-Pinello and Hems, 2015, looked at the possible functions of feedback. They identified that feedback can serve as a reinforcer, punisher, instruction, rule, or even a discriminative stimulus. Before providing feedback, think about your goal for the feedback. What effect do you want to have on the staff's or trainee's behavior? If you're not clear on this, your staff or trainee won't be either. Remember that each person is a unique individual. This is something you obviously know, but as busy professionals, we often make assumptions about what motivates our staff and trainees, even if we don't do this with our clients. You must get to know your staff or trainee to determine what is reinforcing or punishing to them, and how they respond to rules or instructions, in order for your feedback to have the desired result. Sleeman et al., 2020, conducted a meta-analysis of 71 articles that included 96 performance feedback methods. While the results indicated that feedback is effective in altering staff behavior, as we would expect, some specific feedback characteristics resulted in larger effect sizes. Some of the characteristics that had the most impact on behavior included frequency of feedback, supervisors as the source of feedback, and self-generated feedback. The authors found that the privacy of the feedback actually had no influence on the effectiveness of the feedback. The authors suggested that an assessment might improve the effectiveness of feedback by ensuring that the feedback aligned with the values of the staff and trainee. They also discussed combining feedback with other behavioral principles, including antecedents, goal setting, and consequences. Essentially, for feedback to be effective, you must understand your staff or trainee in meaningful ways. Early in my career, I struggled as a supervisor. I had trouble motivating staff to implement the strategies that I taught. I had trainees and staff react in ways I didn't expect to feedback I provided. Sure, some supervision went well, but I knew I had a lot to learn. It was hard to find a balance between encouraging my staff to keep doing the wonderful things they were doing and offering tips and suggestions to help them improve their skills. I used many traditional methods of supervision and feedback, including some that worked really well, like the relationship bank, and some that failed miserably, like the feedback sandwich, which is what we're going to talk about. The feedback sandwich is an analogy many of us were taught as a means of providing feedback while maintaining a strong relationship. The idea is that you sandwich any corrective feedback between two positive statements. The corrective statement is the meat between the two slices of positive bread. This is intended to soften the blow of the corrective feedback so it's easier for staff to accept it. Here are some examples. This is Sally and her supervisor, Frank. Frank thinks Sally is a great RBT, but when she praises her clients, she tends to use a monotone voice and overuses the phrase, "good job." Frank wants Sally to enjoy her role, and he's a little worried about offending her. At the end of a session with Johnny, this was the feedback that he gave. "Sally, I really liked the way you incorporated Johnny's targets during NET. Remember to deliver that reinforcement right away with enthusiasm. You did a great job following his interests throughout the session." Here, Frank provides valuable positive feedback to Sally. She's incorporating Johnny's targets during NET, and she's following his interests during the session. Frank's corrective feedback is that Sally needs to be more immediate and enthusiastic with reinforcement. In this example, Sally feels pretty good about her session, which is important. But do you think she's going to catch the important feedback her supervisor wants her to hear? What impact will this feedback have on her performance? Let's take a look at one more example. This is Ben and his supervisor, Kate. Ben is working toward his BCBA certification and working with 3-year-old Kevin. Ben feels he is really good at DTT, but tends to avoid NET. He brings his clients to the table whenever he has the opportunity because he feels he has more control of the sessions. Kate is concerned that DTT is not developmentally appropriate for Kevin and wants Ben to utilize NET more. Kate feels strongly that NET is better for Kevin, but Ben has had trouble with other supervisors in the company, and she doesn't want to make him mad. Following Ben's session with Kevin, Kate provides the following feedback. "Ben, you did a great job staying engaged with Kevin when he earned reinforcement. It's really important that you remember to incorporate his current targets during NET rather than spending so much time at the table with him. Your data have been really accurate during the past month. Which of the statements will have the most meaning to Ben? What will he remember from his feedback? How will the feedback impact his future behavior?" Since we want to provide more positive than corrective feedback, this strategy seems like a good idea on the surface. The structure helps us provide twice as many positive statements as corrective statements. The problem is that although this method makes the supervisor feel better, it's not actually an effective means of delivering feedback. According to Hogarth and Einhorn, 1992, the feedback sandwich masks the reason for the feedback and may cause confusion. The staff or trainee is likely to focus on the first and last parts while missing the key message in the middle. Usually, any corrective feedback a supervisor feels needs to be communicated is pretty important. When you use the feedback sandwich, you often don't accomplish the goal of providing the feedback in the first place. Let's look at another traditional feedback model that's a bit more useful. Stephen Covey, author of many classic and important business relationship books, such as The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, described the concept of an emotional bank account when discussing interpersonal relationships in business. The bank account represents either a positive or negative relationship. As long as there's a positive balance in the account, the relationship generally feels positive to both people. Positive interactions make deposits into the bank, and negative interactions are withdrawals. The more dramatic or impactful the interaction, the bigger the deposit or the withdrawal is. There are 4 ways to make deposits into the bank: courtesy, kindness, honesty, and keeping commitments. Each of these behaviors builds the balance of the bank account. Similarly, there are 4 ways to make withdrawals on the account: discourtesy, disrespect, threats, and overreactions. Enough of these behaviors and your bank account will go into bankruptcy. While this isn't strictly a behavior analytic concept, the deposits represent reinforcement and the withdrawals represent punishment. I think we all know that there are many more ways to add or withdraw from the account, but it does provide a framework for us to remember to focus on those deposits. This seems obvious, especially with all that we know about ABA, but we often act and react to our staff and trainees without conscious thought about how our words impact the other person or their behavior. We get caught up in the day-to-day interactions and forget to pay attention. We also forget that not everyone reacts to feedback the same way. Let's look at an example. Felicia provides supervision for Ben, who has just started at Awesome ABA as an RBT. He is thinking about getting his BCBA certification, but he's not sure yet. He didn't have a good experience with supervisors from his previous job at Unethical ABA, and that's part of the reason he left. Although he hopes for a better experience at Awesome ABA, he's skeptical. His previous supervisors didn't give him any autonomy and were always micromanaging his sessions. He didn't see how he could grow into a BCBA with someone dictating everything he does. When Felicia shows up for their first supervision session, she starts providing suggestions for how to structure the session. Ben starts to have flashbacks and stops listening. In this example, Felicia is starting from a negative balance in the relationship bank because Ben already feels negatively about supervision. Unfortunately, Felicia isn't aware of this, and she starts making withdrawals on the relationship right away by showing disrespect for Ben from his point of view by assuming he doesn't know how to structure a direct therapy session. Felicia has a different perspective. She feels she's helping Ben get established with his new client and helping them build a strong therapeutic relationship. Everyone is different. They come with their own sets of thoughts, feelings, and memories, which cause them to react differently to feedback. What builds one person's relationship bank might make a withdrawal on another's. How do you know what will add or withdraw to your trainee's bank? As behavior analysts, we might conduct preference assessments by simply asking our staff or trainee what motivates them. But many people have a difficult time articulating what actually works best. We can observe how they respond to feedback over time and try different ways to motivate them. But we run the risk of going into bankruptcy in the process. Although the relationship bank is a helpful analogy, it's not enough to help us provide an amazing supervision experience. I spent years studying many of these different relationship skills and working to improve my leadership skills. I studied leaders in other industries like John Maxwell, Ozan Varol, and Simon Sinek. I read books by leaders in ABA, including Aubrey Daniels, John Bailey, and Dennis Reed. I took courses on leadership and providing effective supervision. Through years of research, observing other supervisors, and endless trial and error, I developed a 4-part system for providing supervision. I now call this 4-part framework RISE. RISE stands for realize, impart, sharpen, and empower. With each trainee, you want to realize your role as a leader, impart your knowledge and experience, sharpen to bring the trainee's existing skills to a new level, then finally empower the trainee to become a future leader in ABA. Through each step of this framework, your relationship and communication skills play a vital role in your trainee's success. Your trainee must trust and respect you so they value your feedback. The first 2 steps in the RISE framework focus on building that trusting relationship with your trainee so they will be open and accepting of the feedback you give. The final 2 steps capitalize on that relationship by providing meaningful, compassionate feedback. Think of a time you've received feedback from someone you didn't know very well. Even if the feedback was positive, you probably didn't trust that the other person really meant what they said. The stronger the relationship, the more effective the feedback during the final 2 steps. Let me tell you a quick story. If you know me or have joined me for other trainings, then you know that I tell a lot of stories and use them to teach. I provided supervision for this one BCBA candidate as she worked as an RBT with one of my clients. We worked together with this client for 6 months when there were some major changes in the company that caused the RBT to lose most of her other clients. She had the opportunity to pick up more hours by working with more of my clients, only she told me that she didn't want to because she didn't want to work with me more than she already was. She said that I made her feel uncomfortable. I was blindsided and I had no idea that she felt that way. It was a huge blow to my ego at first, but after taking a step back, I recognized it for the learning opportunity that it actually was. We had a meeting where she explained the 2 encounters we had where I provided corrective feedback. These situations seemed minor to me, especially since we had many more positive interactions from my perspective, but they obviously were important to her. I apologized to her, but she had no interest in restoring our relationship. It was through this and other humbling experiences that I learned the importance of building that trusting relationship before jumping in to provide feedback. As Slayman et al. 2020 suggested, an assessment would provide information about how a specific staff or trainee might respond to feedback. If I had taken the time to understand the values of the RBT in the story I just shared, I probably could have avoided upsetting her and actually accomplished the goal of my feedback. What I really wanted was to help my client, who was distraught. But in the end, I didn't accomplish that goal at all. The RBT became upset and refused to give a crying child the reinforcer she had previously promised him. One of the best ways that I had found to get to know my staff and trainees is through the use of the ACT matrix. Using this process helps you establish a partnership with them. There's a lot more to ACT than we will cover here. I will link to resources below the video if you want to learn more. The ACT matrix was created in 2009 by Kevin Polk, Mark Webster, and Gerald Hambright. The overall focus of ACT is on creating psychological flexibility, which is something that we all can benefit from. I'd like to share my point of view with all of you. Is that okay with you? Great. Before we get started, your second code word is matrix. The ACT matrix helps us with perspective taking. Consider this. This is Deborah. Deborah loves her husband, who has been traveling overseas for work. She hasn't seen him in person in over 6 months. When she sees him walking up the driveway from the taxi that dropped him off, she runs toward him. Can we all agree that this is probably expected behavior? Now, when that taxi starts speeding out of control toward Deborah, she runs away. If you were her neighbor and looked out your window while Deborah was running, you wouldn't know why she was running unless you could also see either her husband or the taxi. Without understanding Deborah's perspective, you wouldn't know how to react. The ACT matrix helps us do some of this perspective-taking work. Taking a closer look out your window, you can observe Deborah's behavior. What you can't see are her thoughts and feelings that influence her behavior. The ACT matrix helps us sort all of this out. The ACT matrix is a visual representation that allows us to sort our experiences into 4 categories. It consists of 2 intersecting lines. The horizontal line represents the 2 directions you can go in your life, toward or away from different pleasant or unpleasant experiences. And the vertical line represents the separation between the physical world experienced through our 5 senses above the horizontal line and the mental world experienced through our thoughts, feelings, and memories below the horizontal line. I would like to use this framework to create an understanding of our shared purpose today. But first, let's take a closer look at how to use the matrix. When starting with the ACT matrix, begin in the bottom right-hand quadrant by listing who and what matters most. For the sake of today's training, these might be things you value that are related to supervision or this training. You might value your time at the ocean like I do, but that might not apply too much to the struggle you're having getting your staff to implement the behavior plan with fidelity. In the previous example, Deborah, her husband is important to her. Next, shift to the lower left-hand quadrant and answer the question, what difficult thoughts, feelings, or memories get in the way of chasing who and what matters most? This can be anything that comes up. There are no wrong answers. Common thoughts, feelings, and feelings that might get in your way include fear of failure, feeling incompetent, or feeling responsible for something bad happening to someone else. In this quadrant, we want to include memories of past challenges related to the current situation. This might include being yelled at by a past supervisor or being talked down to by a professor. For Deborah, this might be a fear that her husband might not be as excited to see her as she is to see him. Once you identify the main internal variables at play in the situation, you begin to look at the observable behaviors. This is kind of where we're all a little bit more comfortable. What behavior do you engage in that allows you to escape those difficult thoughts, feelings, and memories you just listed? This might be behaviors such as complaining to your spouse, drinking wine at the end of a hard day, or even avoiding the situation altogether. For Deborah, she might decide to sit in the house and wait for her husband to approach her first. The final quadrant looks at what behaviors you engage in or could engage in that will bring you closer to who and what matters most to you. These behaviors allow you to chase those things that are important to you. They might be things like taking this course, reading research articles, or spending time with people who matter to you. For Deborah, she runs towards her husband, literally. Now, do you think you might have the opportunity to notice some of these things as they come up for you over the next week or so? Are these thoughts, feelings, and behaviors working for you? Sorting these experiences allows you to observe all these things without judgment. You notice the impact of the public and private events on the situation. With these experiences sorted, you can begin to make conscious choices that help you engage in behaviors that move you toward who and what matters most to you. One of the parents I worked with years ago had difficulty changing how she interacted with her son. Each time she found herself making excuses for not trying one of my recommendations, she'd say, "And how's that working for me?" Get in the habit of asking yourself this question. If it's working, great, keep doing it. If it's not bringing you closer to those things that are important to you, it's time to think about making a change. That was a really quick overview and a lot of information about the ACT matrix, especially if this is new to you. Don't worry, we are going to go through some more examples. I will also give you more resources at the end if you're interested in learning more. When working with another person or a group of people, you can use the ACT matrix to help develop a joint mission. You can sort your shared experiences together. Let's give this a try. Today, we are working toward a shared purpose. Because you all signed up for this training, I can assume that you value your role in improving the field of ABA and understand how important supervision is. Learning might also be important to all of us. Also, our clients, families, staff, and trainees are all important. For the sake of this training, these are some of our shared values. If you have other things that are relevant, leave them in the comments below. Now, let's think about some of the thoughts, feelings, and memories that we might share that prevent us from reaching those things we chase. We probably all have some memories of past supervisors that we either think we can't live up to or that we're afraid we're going to imitate. We might share a fear of making staff mad, which could result in them leaving. Most of us also probably feel that we don't have enough time to learn something new or practice skills we know we should use. Do you have other thoughts, feelings, or memories to add to this list? You can put them in the comments below. Now let's answer the question, what do we do collectively or individually to avoid the thoughts, feelings, and memories we just talked about? I don't know about you, but I tend to stick with routines that are familiar. We might avoid providing corrective feedback, especially to staff who don't respond well. And we probably all prioritize other tasks over learning new ways to provide supervision. If you engage in other behaviors to avoid unpleasant thoughts, feelings, and memories related to supervision, go ahead and put them in the comments below. Let's wrap this up by taking a look at what we are doing or could do to help get us closer to those things we value. You all are taking this course. Hopefully, this helps you get closer to those things we all value. You could share this information with others, and you could make a to-do list that includes the steps you need to take to get you closer to those things we just listed on the first step. What did I miss? What other things could you do to bring you closer to who and what matters most? Add them in the comments below. Now, do you think you will have the opportunity to notice some of these things? Are our behaviors working to help bring us closer to our joint mission? Let's do some more practice. Remember the story I told you about the trainee I worked with who was very upset by my feedback. Let's take a closer look at the situation. For the sake of this exercise, let's call this trainee Jen. In real life, Jen worked with me in a clinic setting. And by the way, Jen is not her real name, and I have changed some of the details of the story to maintain her privacy. She was upset that I gave her feedback in front of her coworkers. She had forgotten to give her client a promise reinforcer for going to circle time, and the client was very upset. I pointed this out to her. The other situation that upset her involved this client's programming. As part of her unrestricted activities, she had been updating the client's programs in our online data collection system. She added a letter recognition program. I told her that his insurance would not pay for us to teach academics unless academics triggered challenging behavior. Since this child enjoyed academics, it wasn't something we could work on. Both of these situations seemed minor to me, but obviously they had real meaning to her, and I did not provide feedback in a way that was helpful to her. How would my relationship with her be different if I started with the ACT matrix during our first supervision sessions? Let's try it and see how things might have been a little bit different. Let's imagine a different reality, one in which I took the time to create a shared purpose with Jen. Before you begin talking about the ACT matrix with someone, ask them for permission to share your perspective. If you've been working with this person for a while, tell them that you learned something new and want to give it a try. Then ask them for permission. If they say no, respect their answer and practice with someone else. You can take some time to build the relationship bank account and establish some trust with the staff or trainee. Over time, they might become more receptive to using the ACT matrix. Let's assume that I asked Jen for permission to share my perspective and she agreed. First, I ask her questions to help me understand who and what are important to her. I might ask her, what's one personal achievement you feel proud of? What can you see as the next major milestone in your career? What is one area you'd like to grow in that you find challenging? Which areas of work do you value autonomy the most? Jen might respond that what matters most to her is becoming a BCBA, her clients, teaching, and her coworkers. This gives me some insight into her values. Next, let's ask some questions to help us understand the thoughts, feelings, and memories that get in the way of those things Jen values. I might ask questions like, have you had any supervisors who you found difficult to work with? What is something that you don't like about supervision? Jen might have responded by telling me that she is sometimes embarrassed when she makes a mistake, and that she remembers when a past supervisor pointed out a mistake she made in front of her coworkers. She might also express a fear of failure as she works toward becoming a BCBA. This information helps me shape a better understanding of Jen's perspective as it relates to supervision. I then ask her about the things she does to find relief from the things she just listed. To help her, I might ask, how do you react when presented with a task you don't want to do or feedback that you disagree with? What do you do when you've had a really hard day at work? This might be tough for Jen to own up to, but maybe if she's feeling comfortable enough with me, she might say that she gets kind of quiet and withdraws when she's given feedback she doesn't agree with. She might choose to do a different task when she's asked to do something she doesn't want to do. And when she's had a really hard day, she talks to one of her friends who is also in the process of getting her BCBA certification. Jen might not feel comfortable enough to share these things with me right away. She might be worried that I will judge her if I haven't invested enough in our relationship bank before I have this conversation with her. Each person is different and has a different comfort level in sharing these things. That's okay. I might share some of the things I do to get relief as an example, but we can always come back to this when we have some time to build the relationship bank. Finally, we can talk about some of the things she's doing or could do to get her closer to those things that are important to her. To get her thinking about different ideas, I could ask questions like, what can you do to bring you closer to your coworkers? What are you doing to work toward your BCBA certification? How do you improve your skills as a teacher? What's your favorite way to celebrate a job well done? Jen might respond by telling me that she knows that she could talk to a supervisor that she trusts to help her and to give her advice on studying for the exam. She also thinks it might be good for her to hang out with some of her coworkers outside of work since they don't have a lot of time to talk during sessions. I then asked Jen if she might have the opportunity to notice some of these things as she begins her work. I let her know that I'm there to help her reach her goals. Through this process, Jen realizes that her thoughts and values matter. She feels important and heard. That adds a whole lot of to our relationship bank and sets the stage for us to be able to have important discussions later on. I could do another loop of the matrix and talk about our shared purpose like we did earlier. This could help Jen see that we are part of a team and working toward shared goals and values. We could talk about some of our individual experiences that might influence our current relationship. We could also set the stage for bidirectional feedback as something we could do to reach our shared purpose. This might allow her to feel more open in communicating with me. I won't go through the whole loop now, but think about a relationship you have with one of your staff. What would your shared purpose matrix look like with that staff? Do you see how this exercise can help build that relationship bank with your staff and trainees? What might you learn about them by going through this exercise? Could you learn something about yourself during this exercise? Let me know in the comments below. After going through the ACT matrix with Jen, which type of relationship might I have with her? How do you think my feedback might have been different? By going through this exercise in our imaginary world, I learned that she doesn't like to receive feedback in front of her coworkers. Knowing this, I might have been a lot more subtle in letting her know that her client wanted the reinforcer that she promised him. I could have asked her to chat for a minute away from everyone else. I might have also changed how I approached the feedback about the academic tasks she wanted to include in his programming. After learning how important teaching is to her, I might have empathized more with her when while I was explaining that the insurance company dictates the types of skills and behaviors we can target since they're the ones who pay for the service. Even if I make a mistake and provide feedback in a way that she doesn't like, she might accept it more easily because she understands our shared purpose. Going through this process, let her know that I do honestly value her thoughts and feelings. Well, I will link to more resources below. The work of several groups have had the greatest influence on my learning in relation to ACT and the ACT matrix, including the Association for Contextual Behavioral Science, the ACT Matrix Academy, the Sorting School, and the Zen Social Worker. Kevin Polk, Tina Long, and Timothy Gordon are just a few of the people behind these groups. If you want to learn more about using the ACT matrix to form a partnership, check out our CEU course called the Partnership Language 5-Day Challenge. You can earn 2 CEUs for completing this course. This is a great tool for use when working with staff, but it is also great for working with parents and other professionals. I'll link to that course below as well. We've covered a lot of information today. Here are some important points that I want you to take away from this training. Use the ACT matrix to develop a partnership or shared purpose before providing feedback. The ACT matrix helps you understand what drives your staff's and trainees' behaviors, allowing you to tailor your feedback to align with their unique values. Be mindful of the relationship bank by providing more positive than corrective feedback, and be aware of how your actions impact the balance of the bank account. And finally, avoid the feedback sandwich. Let positive feedback stand on its own without contaminating it with corrective feedback. Let corrective feedback stand alone so that the important message doesn't get missed. When you take the time to develop a shared purpose with your staff or trainee, you don't need to be afraid of how they will respond to corrective feedback. You all now know one way to make a positive difference in our field. If you have other thoughts about this topic, put them in the comments below. Thank you all for joining and practicing with me today. Your final code word is practice. There will be links to additional resources under the video. Please complete the quiz to receive your certificate. If you have any questions about any of this material, you can reach out to me at support@masteraba.com.